After 5 years of being sexually assaulted by her slave master, Celia, a slave, had had enough and decided that she was going to get her lick back. And so on the night of June 23rd, 1855, she brutally murdered her slave owner, disintegrated his body, and then paid his grandson in walnuts to scatter his ashes all over the plantation that she lived at. I know I'm not supposed to laugh at murder, but somebody had to pay them spiritual reparations, and I highly doubt it was Celia. Y'all get y'all popcorn. Welcome back, YouTube. And for those who do not know me, hello. My name is Noah, and on my channel we talk about death, true crime, haunted people, places, and things, spiritual reparation, heavy on the spiritual reparations, especially for this episode, and how you can fuck around and find out. If you are not subscribed here, what are we waiting on? Come on, bestie, subscribe. And if you are not following me on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok, it's all going to be linked down below. Please follow me on those platforms as well. Y'all ever heard of the slave who was tired of her master's sexual assault, bore children for this man, and murdered him? Yes, you have. You have. Don't lie and say you have not, because I have covered this story on my TikTok, and then I brought that said TikTok over to YouTube, but I never really got into it because TikTok only allows me 10 minutes, and 10 minutes sometimes is not enough to explain what went down. So on today's episode, we will be talking about the trial of a slave named Celia. Now, before we even start this video, I know that some of you guys are not African American. But everybody that follows me, or at least I would like to think everyone that follows me, has moral code and understands spiritual reparations and how people can fuck around and find out, will not judge me for having a lack of empathy for Robert Newsom, her slave owner. Because I can say from the pits of my soul, from the bottom of my heart, I have a lack of empathy or sympathy for what happened to Robert Newsom, who was a slave owner, who was a colonizing monster. I don't feel bad. And if y'all are the followers and subscribers that I think y'all are, y'all will not feel bad either, no matter what the skin color or background. And as always, the creators, i.e. me, you may have seen this story reposted, stolen on Facebook. You have seen this story on other people's YouTube pages, wherever, right? But I covered it on TikTok over a year ago, maybe a year ago. So I will be tagged down below. Y'all make sure y'all are following me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, all of that, because I have a problem with thievery and I don't like it. If you don't tag me, then it's thievery. Celia was a slave that was born in 1835. Not a lot is known about Celia's history. Not a lot is known about her childhood. But around 14, the age of 14 or so, she was bought by a slave owner named Robert Newsom. Now, Robert Newsom bought her in 1850, right after his wife died. And he bought her for one reason and one reason only, and that was to be his concubine. Okay? This little girl was bought to be I can't say it on YouTube, but a smeg slave. Celia was the same age as Robert's daughter, his birth daughter. And he disguised this whole Smeg's slave as her being a domestic worker for his plantation. Now, he bought her in Audrain County. All of this is in Missouri, but they lived in Callaway County. And before they could even step foot into the actual big house, he sexually assaulted her for the first time. And it would not be the last. He purposely kept Celia in her own housing away from his other 5 male slaves. She was the only female slave out of all of his domestic workers. And he did this on purpose because he didn't want anybody else to even take interest in Celia. He wanted her for himself. This man literally owned 800 acres of land and only had 6 domestic workers to handle all of this land. This land included pigs, horses, cows, everything, every animal that you could think of that's on a farm, he had. And even though he bought Celia and Celia was in the big house making dinner for his grown ass kids, she was really only there to provide sex needs. I have to be very careful with this video because I'm trying to be on the good side of YouTube. So he gets Celia to the property. He's already sexually assaulted her. And from there on out, for the next 5 years, this was her life. She was constantly harassed, constantly pursued by Robert Newsom. And all of his children turned a blind eye because the youngest was Celia's age. The rest of them were grown-ass women and men. Watching this happen, acted like nothing ever even happened. And because of this constant pursuit of Celia and the sexual assault that he was doing to her, she bore 2 children between the years of 1851 and 1855. Can you imagine having to have 2 children by your assailant, by your abuser? This woman, this young girl, was just for tough because there was no other option. You were going to have these children and let the other slaves know basically that this man was doing this to you. And again, his grown children turned a blind eye like they didn't see them, 2 very much so biracial children. And even though Celia was warned and told that she could not deal with anybody else outside of Robert, she did eventually fall in love with one of Robert's other slaves, and his name was George. They literally had this whirlwind romance where he was sneaking into her cabin, and it was very much so known, but on the low. So she had fallen in love and really was probably sick of Robert's shit. But either in the late winter or the early parts of 1855, Celia fell pregnant again. She was not sure who the baby daddy was because she was still being assaulted by Robert Newsom, but she was dealing with George. And to be honest, George wasn't shit either. Sorry, not sorry. I'm saying it like it is. Because he told her, either you quit the old man. Those are his words. You quit the old man or I'm leaving. As if she had a fucking choice. It's just disgusting. All of it. How no one was able to protect Celia. And even though Robert Newsom was their slave owner, it's like there was no empathy even from the man that she fell in love with. Because George, she a slave, you a slave. If you're not disobeying master, why would she? Y'all know the dangers that comes with saying no. But in his words, this is quote, this came from Celia's mouth herself. I have the court records up right here on my computer screen. It says that George told her that he would have nothing to do with her if she did not quit the old man, as if she was in love with this man. Ugh, that just gave me the freaking ick. Of course, Celia couldn't just say no. But during this pregnancy in 1855, she had extreme morning sickness. She was very much so sick. And even though she was sick and did not feel her best, Robert Newsom still was sexually assaulting her. Mind you, her children stayed in the same cabin as her. So he is doing this in front of children. So she approaches his daughters. Their names were Virginia and Mary, and asked them to help her in getting their daddy the fuck away from her so that she could be in peace. Because she was too sick to be performing these acts with Robert Newsom. It's unknown if Virginia and Mary actually helped Celia, but we do know that the sexual assault continued. It never stopped. And it caused her to even beg Robert Newsom to stop. She went to him directly and said, at least through my pregnancy, please give me peace. I'm so sick. I don't know why I'm this sick with this pregnancy and this baby, but I have morning sickness out of this world and I just can't handle it. Do you think his ass stopped? No. He continued. And he was finna fuck around and find out. I'm going to read directly from the court documents so that y'all can understand and get context as to what happened on June 23rd, 1855. On June 23rd, 1855, Newsom told Celia he was coming to her cabin that night around 10 p.m. Newsom left his bedroom and walked the 50 yards to Celia's brick cabin. When Newsom told Celia it was time for Smegs, she retreated to a corner of the cabin. He advanced towards her. Celia then grabbed a stick, placed it there earlier that day, and Celia raised the stick about as large as the upper part of a Windsor chair, but not so long, and struck her master over the head hard. Newsom groaned and sank down on a stool or towards the floor. Celia clubbed Newsom over the head the second time, killing him. This was the testimony of Jefferson Jones. Ashe. After making sure he was dead, Celia spent an hour or so pondering her next step. Finally, she decided to burn Newsom's body in her fireplace. She went outside to gather slaves and used them to build a raging fire. Then she dragged the corpse over the fireplace and pushed it into the flames. She kept the fire going through the next night. I'm so sorry, y'all. I'm so sorry. I have no remorse. Like I said, if y'all feel like y'all need to unfollow me, but Robert Newsom was a piece of shit. He was a grapist. I can't say, y'all know. He was a grapist, a colonizing grapist at that. And he was just a disgusting human being. I feel nothing. I feel not an ounce, not even a little bit. She kept the fire going through the night. In the early morning, she gathered up bone fragments from the ashes and smashed them against the hearth stones. Then she threw the particles back into the fireplace. A few larger pieces of bone she put underneath the hearth or the hearth and under the floor between a sleeper and the fireplace. Shortly before daybreak, Celia carried some of the ashes out into the yard and then went to bed. In the morning, as Newsom's family was growing concerned about Robert's disappearance, Celia enlisted the help of Newsom's grandson, Coffee Wainscott, in shoveling ashes out of her fireplace and into a bucket. Coffee testified later he decided to help when the slave said she would give me 2 dozen walnuts if I would carry the ashes out. I said, good lick. Following Celia's instructions, Coffee distributed the remains of his grandfather along a path leading to the stables. Key. I'm going to just say this, okay? The child was innocent, but more than likely he would have grown up to be a slave owner as well, which he probably did. And he did not deserve to scatter his granddaddy's ashes like seasoning into a bowl of raw chicken. But I still do not feel anything. Do you understand? This is just one story. This is one of the only documented stories of a slave getting the ultimate lick back. Shout out to Celia. Shout out to the ancestors because, baby, the savagery, I don't even know if that's a word, of having the person, your abuser, your slave master, being spread out on the land that he did so much wrong on by his grandson, by his lineage. I could never even match that much petty in my life. Let's continue. On the morning of the 24th, Virginia Newsom searched for her father and along by nearby creeks and coves, fearing that he might have drowned. By mid-morning, the search party grew to include several neighbors and Newsom's son, Harry. After a fruitless hours of searching, suspicion began to turn to George, who it was thought may have been motivated to kill Newsom out of jealousy. William Powell, owner both of slaves and an adjoining 160-acre farm, questioned George. George denied any knowledge of, but then added suspiciously, it was not worthwhile to hunt for him anywhere except close to the house. Not you being an informant. Not you PC'd up. George, what the hell? You one of us, bro. Why would you ever even say that? Faced with most likely severe threats, George eventually provided an additional damning bit of information. He told Powell he believed the last walking Newsom had done was along the path pointing to the path leading from the house to the Negro cabin. George's comments immediately led investigators to the conclusion that Newsom had been killed in Celia's cabin. The fact that even back then black women weren't protected is fucking crazy to me. You have been lying with this woman. You have been sleeping with this woman. And you still led Massa's team right back to her cabin. So whenever they all went to Celia's cabin and did not find Robert Newsom, no sign of him, they literally tried to pull Celia in by telling them that George had told them where Massa was. And in true fashion, she said she didn't know what the hell they was talking about. Massa ain't over here. I ain't seen Massa. Okay, she denied all knowledge or any accusations. Because Mr. Powell saying, oh, George told me, he was hoping for a confession. He even threatened to beat her, take her kids. And she still was like, I can't see, I'm blind. She still maintained her innocence, okay? She said she don't know nothing, she ain't seen nothing, she ain't seen that man, she don't know nothing. But a person can only take so much. And eventually, Celia was like, okay, I will tell you what happened if Harry and David, which were Robert Newsom's sons, were out of the room. Because remember, if he is pronounced dead, she belongs to them. And there's no telling what they would have done to her if they heard her confession in real time. So she started to confessing to this murder. Following Celia's confession, the search party located Newsom's ashes along the path to the stables. They also gathered bits of bones from Celia's fireplace, larger bone fragments from underneath the hearthstone, and Newsom's burnt buckles, buttons, and a blackened pocket knife. The collected items were placed in a box for the display during the inquest that was to come. Acting on an affidavit by David Newsom's, Robert Newsom's son. The case of State of Missouri versus Celia, a slave, commenced. 2 justices of the peace, 6 local residents comprising an inquest jury, and 3 summoned witnesses. I mean, the man wasn't even dust yet. And they had all these people there to witness and interview and all this other stuff to a 19-year-old slave that was being abused for 5 years and bore 2 children to this man. William Powell, which was the neighbor, testified. Coffee, Wainscott testified. And she insisted she wasn't trying to kill him. She just wanted him to leave her the hell alone. And he just wouldn't take no for an answer. One thing to know about this is that in the state of Missouri, she had a case because even back then, SA was illegal, but it was illegal for white women, people. It did not apply to slaves. So the jury that was inquested quickly determined that she had probable cause to kill his ass. Celia's trial came at the time of heightened tensions over the issue of slavery in 1854. Congress had passed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which repealed the Missouri Compromise of 1820 and allowed settlers in those territories to decide for themselves whether to permit slavery within their boundaries. So it was already up in the air if slavery was morally, which I don't understand how people that were not abolitionists thought that this was normal, but it already was a problem because some people did not believe in slavery. They were abolitionists, whereas some people still owned and had slaves. So she kind of got a break there because a lot of people did not believe in this behavior, and then a lot of people did. And since a lot of people believe that Celia had a case, a lawyer by the name of John Jameson literally was like, I will defend you. Because a lot of the pro-slavery people in Missouri at the time expected Celia just to hang. So they went to trial. This is why this story is so amazing. And I wasn't able to tell all of this in my 10-minute TikTok video, but they absolutely went to trial. And her jurors, of course, were all male. And they ranged from the age of 34 to 75. And with one being the exception, they were married and with children. And they were all farmers. And they were all white. And they were all upset that this even went this far because, of course, slavery still was a thing. And they didn't even want to give her a day in court. They didn't. But because Missouri was one of those states that you are not allowed to SA people, no matter what, they had to. Some of the witnesses were Mr. Powell, Virginia, Mr. Newsom's daughter, Coffee, who spreaded his granddad's ashes around the property unintentionally, and a couple of physicians. It was a nightmare for her. And the judge made all of her defense team's motions nearly impossible to even look at. He denied every single motion. He was not having it. They were so mad that they were wasting tax dollars on a little slave girl who knew her rights, who had an attorney. It was truly a great injustice. And on the 16th day of November of 1855, Celia was sentenced to hang by neck until she passed. And during this time, while she was waiting her execution, because the verdict came in October, so she had about a month or so, she gave birth to a stillborn. This poor baby, I swear. And 5 days before she was supposed to be hanged until she was no more, someone took Celia out of jail, her and another inmate, and it's unknown if it was an escape or if it was her defense team that took her out, and then she was returned. And when she was returned, the judge moved her execution date to December 21st. And her defense team was hoping that they can stall this out until they found a resolution. They took it to the Supreme Court and tried to get it overturned, and the Supreme Court denied the motion. On December 21st, 1855, Celia hanged at the gallows. During her last interview, she said no one assisted her or abetted her in any way. She told her interrogator, as reported in the Fulton Telegraph, as soon as I struck him, the devil got into me, and I struck him with a stick until he was dead. And then I rolled him into the fire and burned him up. And even though this did not end the way we all wish it would have, I still give a slave named Celia props, because only ancestors and spirit guides could get you through a trial of that magnitude back then, especially when you were still considered owned property. The strength of that woman was unmatched. And even though the court document ends here, I do know that one of Newsom's sons actually purchased her kids. Because a lot of people like to say, I'm not my ancestors. Ah, blah, 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 blah. That's an insult. That's a direct insult to them. Because, honey, you could never be your ancestors. Your ancestors went through things that you couldn't even bear. They went through things that you couldn't even imagine. They put up with shit that the average person would have broke over. This is your friendly reminder to quit saying that stupid shit. Please. That is all for today. And if you have a story you would like me to cover, a haunted people, places, or things story, true crime, fuck around and find out story, please email me. I will be leaving my email down below. And until next time, y'all do good, be good, and stay safe.